Welcome back to another one of my shitty vlogs, and into this shitty vlog, I'm going to talk about why I think iOS development is easier as compared to native Android development. I'm going to talk about my experiences with Swift this week, with Swift UI more specifically, do some, I'm going to do a little bit of a code demo, show you some code, show you why I think iOS development is easier, and then I'm going to talk about Kotlin Multiplatform, and more specifically, Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. So that's a totally different thing. There's Kotlin Multiplatform and Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. I'm going to explain the differences, and also, if you don't know what Kotlin Multiplatform is, I'll explain that too in this video. So don't worry, I'm going to explain it all. It's going to be a good vlog. I encourage you to watch this one because there's some great perspectives from me, who is a native Android developer, my first experiences with Swift, and KMM obviously. So let's get into the video. So now, why do I think iOS development is easier than native Android development? Well, I think that there's two perspectives that you sort of need to look at this through the lens of. The first perspective is if you're a beginner, and the second perspective is if you're sort of a more advanced developer, you are a senior level sort of Android developer. So I think that if you are a senior level Android developer, if you were just to start picking up Swift, I don't think that it would necessarily be, quote unquote, easier than Android development. I think that as a senior level developer, they would probably be quite comparable. I think the real difference here is in the realm of beginners. If you're a beginner and you are first learning Android development, or I guess you have a choice of like learning Android development or learning Swift development or iOS development, 100% iOS development is going to be far, far easier for you to learn. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for this. And I came up with a bunch of reasons, but I'm sure there's, way more reasons, but I'll come up with some that really they're reasons that point to why Android development is difficult. And these are things that if you're a senior developer, you've solved these problems. If you're a senior native Android developer, you know the solutions to these problems, so they're no big deal to you. And if you were to move to iOS development, there would be no problem because these problems don't exist. But if you're a beginner, there's these things I think you would really get hung up on, or there's a high probability that you would get hung up on these things. So the number one reason here that I have is that Android Studio does random things, like gives random errors depending on certain system conditions that are really vague and they're hard to solve, especially when it comes to Gradle. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've opened Android Studio or opened a project from Git or opened something and I got some random Gradle issue or Android Studio issue, and it was really difficult to figure out. As someone who spent thousands of hours in Android Studio, I always end up figuring it out. But if you're a beginner, especially if you're like a new coder, these are things that you just won't get around. You will probably get frustrated and quit, honestly. Like, I could definitely see that happening. With Swift, with Xcode, these things just almost never happen. My first experiences with Xcode were great. I opened it up and I started coding and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. There's mostly one import that you use when I was using Swift UI. Of course, there's more imports as your project grows, but as you're just starting, there's really one import and that's it. Things just generally work. The second point here is dependency conflicts. So if you're an Android developer, you know that we love to use third-party libraries, Retrofit, Dagger, Hilt, Coin, Coding, Volley. I'm just trying to come up with whatever I can think of. Glide, Picasso, all kinds of libraries, and even just like the internal dependencies for the Android components themselves, the stuff that Google makes. There's all kinds of different imports, material, constraint layout, recycler view. All of these dependencies need to get added into your project. With Swift and Swift UI, like I said, there's like one import that you use. I very rarely can see or I talk to iOS developers and they say that it's more of the exception rather than the rule for you to use third-party libraries in your application. And not even just like the fact that you're using all of these third-party libraries on Android, a lot of them don't work well together, or they're not meant to work together. Like you might have constraint layouts version 1.2.3, I'm just picking up random numbers here, and then that one doesn't work with material 1.7.2, but it works with 1.7.3 or whatever. There's all of these like sort of random conflicts that you can very easily get hung up on. And if you're a beginner, the error message that you see from those conflicts is probably not going to be very helpful. So as a beginner, another one that would sort of shut you down pretty quickly is these dependency conflicts. Again, as a guy who spent thousands of hours in Android Studio, I can usually figure it out pretty quickly, but as a beginner, not so much. Also, actually, regarding dependencies and libraries and things like that, I have to say the Android Studio or the Android documentation has improved drastically over even the last 4 years. I think I've been doing Android development for like 5 years, and I can remember back like what the docs were like before, and they have, I don't know, they've easily doubled, tripled, quadrupled in quality over this 5-year span, I would say. So like they're getting better and better, but still like it's not always the case when what they say in the documentation is actually sort of the quote unquote industry best practice, what people actually do. Take async task, for example. How long was async task in the documentation for? I think they only removed it maybe 2 years ago or something like that, but really it was garbage for much longer before that. Everybody was using RX or other sort of reactive third-party libraries. So not always, if you go to the documentation, you don't always see the industry best practice. Whereas with Apple, with iOS, it seems to be the case. Like if you go to the documentation, you're probably going to see like the thing that you should be using. So that's another kind of benefit. Now, the third point here, and I'm sure there's more, but this is where I'm going to cut it off because I'm sure you guys might be getting a little bit bored about this, is there's not that many sort of out of the box solutions for common use cases on Android. Like take for example Recycler View. And I know Compose exists now and it makes it way easier, but let's take Recycler View, for example. There's still lots of people using Recycler View. It's still great. There's nothing wrong with it, but let's just talk about it a little bit. Think about all of the things that you need to do to display a list of data and how common of a use case that is. You need to build your adapter. You need to build your view holder. You need to build the different layouts if you have different layouts inside of that adapter. If you want to attach like headers or pinned sort of items in the list, that's a whole other mechanism that you have to build that's not pre-built. Footers, so much stuff. There's so much stuff. And then also like asynchronously loading the data or updating the data for the list items. Like if the list items change, like what if the guy wants to delete one? That's another thing. Swiping to delete. That's another mechanism that you'd have to build into the adapter. Multi-selection. That would be another mechanism that you'd have to build into that adapter. And these are all very common things. Like, pretty much every app will display a list of data. Almost every single app out there at some point is going to display a list of data. Why wouldn't there be a out of the box solution to display a list of data, be able to delete items from that list, be able to select multiple items from that list, click on a list item and take you to a detail screen, asynchronously load and update the list so that if there's new items added, it will, put them in the correct order and things like that. And also like save the order. Like all of those things are used in every app. Why wouldn't there be an out of the box solution for that when Recycler View has been around for how long? And I know it's improving. Like this isn't me just like trying to shit on Android and telling you how bad they are or whatever. I'm just saying like with such a common use case that is used in almost every app, those specific things, why wouldn't there be like an out of the box easy solution for it? Just saying. So with iOS development, I know I'm using Swift UI, which is like the newest thing. I don't know how it was with, just Swift or Objective-C. It was probably more difficult, but with Swift UI, it's super easy. And I'll show you an example. So here in front of me, I have the use case that I pretty much just described. I have a list of data going from row 1 through 10. It's just like, just to give an example, there's an edit button up here where I can enter some edit mode. I can delete rows. I can click done. I can swipe to delete these if I click on there. And also if I click on these things, it takes me to a detail screen. Notice here it says detail 3 if I clicked on row 3. If I click on row 4, it says detail 4. So it is a specific detail screen unique to that list item that I click. The image is just hard coded in here because I want to show you something else that's super easy about Swift UI. And also there's this nice little back button here. So the title gets automatically added to the back button, and there's an animation. So there's animations in here. Click here, I get taken to the detail screen. Nice little animation. This is just great. This is like, the most common use case you see in almost every application, sorry. And look how much code I had to write. This is it right here. This thing, that is all the code that was required to do that. I have a list of data taken to a detail screen. I have a navigation bar up here. I can delete, I can do all of that. And that's done with this easy sort of code snippet right here. So I know obviously this is done with Swift UI, which is like the newest iOS thing out there right now, similar to Jetpack Compose, but still, like, this is awesome. This is, iOS saying, hey, we know that these are common things that you do in applications. Here is some tools that you can use to build out these common use cases that are easy and they do what you need to do. That is great. Now, I know with Jetpack Compose, it would be pretty similar. It's pretty easy to display a list of data also, but tying it into the navigation bar, having the animations, being able to delete things with animations, entering that edit mode and being able to delete things, navigating to a detail screen with that animation, all of that is just comes built into that use case on iOS. With Jetpack Compose, that stuff you would have to build yourself. So again, like, iOS, I'm just saying, and this is only one example. Like, there's plenty of other examples, I'm sure. I've only been doing iOS development for a week. There's plenty of other sort of scenarios when these common use cases have out-of-the-box solutions for Apple, for Swift UI, I'm sure. So anyway, to summarize my experiences with Swift UI this last week is it seems great. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily, easier than Android development as someone who has spent a lot of time, thousands of hours in Android Studio. So I don't get hung up on the things that people would get hung up on if they were beginners. But my experiences are very positive so far. I love these out-of-the-box solutions that they come up with. They make life easier as a developer. There's one import, very little dependencies that you need, almost nothing, and good so far. So now, what about Kotlin Multiplatform? That's the thing that everybody wants to know about these days. Is it better than Flutter? Is it better than React Native? Is it worth learning? What is it all about? What even is it? How does it work? How are you running Kotlin code on iOS? What's going on here? So Kotlin Multiplatform works by natively running Kotlin code on the Android device and natively running Kotlin code on the iOS device. So it's called Kotlin Native. I don't know too much about it, so I'm not going to try and explain much about it, but I know that what it is it's something called Kotlin Native, and you can run native Kotlin code on the iOS device. That's how it works. Kind of like the JVM. Like, if you think about the JVM will work on a browser, it will work on an Android device, it will work on Mac, it'll work on Linux. The JVM is what runs Java code on those operating systems. So Kotlin Native is, I guess, is analogous to that. It allows you to run Kotlin code natively on iOS, on Android, obviously, or on Linux, on the web. So that's how Kotlin Multiplatform is possible, basically. And so the first question a lot of you probably have, which I probably just answered, is it going to hinder performance to run Kotlin code on an iOS device? And the answer is no, because of Kotlin Native. So you have native Kotlin code running. It's not being transcribed to Swift. It's not being transcribed to Objective-C. It's Kotlin code that's running on the iOS device. So that's why you're not going to get a performance hit when you use KMP. So now, what is Kotlin Multiplatform and what is Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile? Kotlin Multiplatform is just the running of, I'm probably not quite saying this right, but whatever. This is mostly what it is, if I'm saying it incorrect at all. Kotlin Multiplatform would be it refers to the running of Kotlin code on different platforms. So using Kotlin Native to run Kotlin code on iOS, or using Kotlin Native to run Kotlin code on web browser, Linux, whatever. So that is one piece of the pie. Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile is then the tool set that allows us to build cross-platform apps, they're not really cross-platform apps, because technically you're still building a native iOS app, you're still building a native Android app, you just share business logic. But Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile is a plugin for Android Studio that makes it easy for us to basically do all that, to share the business logic and to build two separate apps. So when you open up Android Studio, which I'm going to show you a little demo here, you'll have three directories. Basically, you'll have a shared directory, you'll have a iOS directory, and you'll have an Android directory. So the shared directory is where you put all your common Kotlin code that gets shipped to both the iOS and the Android app. That's shared, right? That's what it means. It's Kotlin code that goes to both devices. And then you have the specific folders, so the Android and the iOS one. That's where the platform specific code goes. So for Android, for example, basically from the Android developer's perspective, nothing changes. You still build your app exactly how you would before. The only difference is some code is now going to be in like a shared directory, and some code is going to be in an Android only directory. But it's basically like, as an Android developer, nothing changes. But if you're an iOS developer, it does change. So then you have your iOS folder where you have your sort of iOS specific code, and the shared code is also shipped to the iOS app. app. So stuff that goes in the iOS sort of specific folder is obviously UI building stuff. You use Swift UI or whatever thing on iOS you use to build the UI, and then any sort of iOS specific libraries that you would be using. But the goal here is to share as much code as possible. So all of your, hopefully your network client, your caching client, your dependencies, like if you're doing dependency injection, your use cases, all of that stuff can be written in Kotlin. So it gets shared in that shared module, shipped to both apps. And then hopefully like in a perfect scenario, the only things that you have to put in the platform specific code for Android and iOS is UI and services and notifications, stuff like that, because obviously those are platform specific. You can't put like push notifications for Android in a iOS folder. That doesn't make any sense. You can't build your Android app UI using Swift UI. That doesn't make any sense. You can't build your iOS UI with Jetpack Compose. That doesn't make any sense, but you can share a huge amount of code. You can share the business logic. So I've been playing around with this. I played around with it actually just yesterday. That was the only day I played around with it. And I started rebuilding my, Jetpack Compose course, the one that I recently published on my website. And I'm trying to build it using KMP. So over here on the left is the Android version, and I only have one screen done. So if I click this, nothing happens here, and it's only displaying static data. It's not actually getting the data from the network. But yeah, I have like the first screen sort of quote unquote finished. This is the Android client here displaying the list of data using Compose and using KMP. And then over here on the right is the iOS. So it's displaying the same thing. It looks the same, and it's sharing the code it's sharing the business code anyway, using my cross-platform or my KMP project. So that's what I have down here. So I told you earlier that you'd have kind of three main folders. You have kind of this shared directory, which is right here. You have the Android app directory, which is right here. And then you have the iOS app, which is right here. So in using the KMM plugin, the Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile plugin, it makes this all really easy. So that's what makes this super easy. I can have my Android app section over here. I can have my shared directory where I have all of my shared business logic that's inside of common main here. So like I have my domain, I got my recipe models, my date utils, domain wrappers, my navigation system, my network client, which I haven't built yet, but I will be building that. These do nothing. I should delete those. That was from the demo. But all this is shared. So I have to open this in Xcode if I want to edit any Swift code. That was the wrong project. Let me open up this one. So if I want to edit any Swift code, I do have to use Xcode, but all I have to do is edit the sort of Swift specific stuff. Like this recipe object right here that's being used in content view, that recipe object is from here. That's this class right here, this recipe class that's not declared in Xcode anywhere. It's only in the KMP project. So that's what I mean by like you share business logic. I'm building my models, my use cases, my network client, my caching client, all that's going to be done here in Android Studio in this common directory. And then in Xcode, I can reference it like this, and then I can, run my app. So like I said, I only have one screen done right now, but it's looking pretty promising. Like I really have, high hopes for this. I think this is going to be really great. And if I was to, talk about what I think the ideal way to build like out the architecture is, which I'm still going to get into this more when I actually dive deeper and build the network client, build the caching client, declare the dependencies, build all the use cases, all that stuff. I still got to dig into that more. But if I was to guess, like in my opinion, the best way to build an app using KMP would be, I would say not necessarily using any particular architectural design pattern like MVI, MVP, MVVM, whatever. I don't think that really matters, but architecture does matter. And what I mean by that is using clean architecture, I think is perfect for this, because using clean architecture, you sort of maximize separation of concerns. You have your presentation layer specific, which would be different for iOS and different for Android. And then you have everything else, which is just business logic, all of your data classes, your interfaces, your networking stuff, your caching stuff, your use cases, all that is Kotlin only. So it's pretty perfect in my opinion for like a KMP project. clean architecture. Anyway, I think I've talked quite enough. I want to sort of end this video, finish this video up. This week, I'm going to be continuing to work with KMP. I'm probably going to keep working on this recipe app, get the caching client set up, network client set up, basically everything. I want it to be exactly how I built it in the Jetpack Compose course. Everything exactly the same, but I'll have an iOS version and an Android version using KMP. Get that done. If I want to take a break from that this week, I might work on the third-party library video. So how to publish a third-party library to Maven Central and then make it open source and all that stuff. So that's what I'm thinking about doing this week. That's the plan. If you liked the video, don't forget to head on over to codingwithmitch.com. Check out my courses. I got all kinds of courses right now, only on Android development, but soon I think you'll see some KMP, some iOS stuff. I'm sure. It's definitely KMP stuff. Go there if you're looking for a specific course. You're not really sure like what to watch. Watch the Clean Architecture course. That is a work of art. Teaches you all kinds of fundamental skills. Whether you're an experienced developer or you're just starting, it might be a little difficult if you're just starting, but I think you'll be able to get through it. That is the course you want to watch. Codingwithmitch.com. Head there, create an account, check it out. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.